So, Matthew chapter 14. So, but Jesus said, they need not go away, you give them something to eat. They said to him, we have only 5 loaves and 2 fish. And he said, bring them here to me. Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass, and taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. By the way, it says, you didn't say the disciples ordered them. It says Jesus ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass. Jesus said to everybody, plant it. That's a tremendous amount of earned authority.
Well, he may have said, would you please sit down?
Yes.
You never know.
And taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and said a blessing. He blessed. Doesn't say that necessarily he blessed the food. It just says he said a blessing. We can spin that 100 different places. What might he have blessed? He might have blessed the food. He might have blessed the crowd. He might have blessed the Father of lights, from whom every good and perfect gift comes. Because he was in fact God from God, light from light, true God from true God, begotten, not made, one in being with the Father. He was light from light. Jesus was light from light. He was capable of speaking to the Father of lights, his Father, and saying, thank you, Lord. I bless you. He said a blessing. What did he bless? He could have blessed the Father. Bless the Lord, O my soul. The Hebrew there for bless, one of the ways of rendering that means to adore. Adore the Lord, O my soul. All that is within me, adore his holy name. Adore the Lord, O my soul, and forget not his benefits. Affection, tenderness, kindness, mercy, compassion. Compassion he had for the crowds. Verse 14, he went ashore, saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them and healed their sick. Then he had compassion on them and gave them a meal. They came back later on, asked, where's breakfast? And he said, I had a sermon instead. That was the kind of compassion because he knew from moment to moment, did they need healing? Did they need a meal or a miracle? Did they need a sermon? He knew what they needed. Their spirits knew what they needed, but they were kind of like, I don't want this. And then later on that day, he had 5,000 people unfriend him on Facebook. You've heard this story dozens of times before. So he set them down. He looked up to heaven and he said a blessing. He blessed quite a few things. Blessing the Lord, blessing the food, blessing the people, blessing the situation, blessing them in their need and the place of their lack. So, how many ways can we think of blessing things rather than cursing things? We've seen generational curses and blessings. Now we have this concept of generational blessings. And how many different things can we find to bless? What does our lifestyle of blessing things look like?
It's true.
Do we bless our time, our land, our community? Do we bless what we were made to do and say, Lord, I celebrate that you made me to do this? Even if it's not to work with humans, if it's to work with animals or time or land, it's still something that you were made to do by him. He has a purpose for you to work with something that's in your wheelhouse. Is it to create something that's not been created? Is it to think of something that's not been thought of? Does your engine exist in nature? He put the engine in you. Does the transmission exist? Or do you need to build your own transmission? What do you need to bless into being? I bless these things, Lord, that do not yet exist, but they will, because you've commanded me to do thus and so.
That's correct. There's real power in that.
Find what you are called to do, even if that's painting, art, sculpture, and bless it. Bless the things that don't exist. Bless your paintings and your sculptings that do not exist to be in alignment in such a way that when people ask you for prints, They order the prints from whatever you have done artwork-wise, watercolor, oil, acrylic, and they got the print copied, and the print is full of the anointing of God, goes into a house and shifts the alignment of the house, and is itself an item and an act of warfare. And an object that, regardless of how many copies it's made, you're basically copying the presence of God in that fashion and the war of God against the kingdom of darkness. And wherever you send your artwork or your item, things are broken. Is your anointing measurable, verifiable? Is it sustained, and does it bring change in that fashion that's measurable, verifiable, and sustained? Everything that Jesus did, measurable, verifiable, and sustained. The Gadarene demoniac had the breaker anointing that was measurable, verifiable, and sustained. When Jesus returned to the region, there were 4,000 people that needed to be fed. 4,000 people that were willing to listen because that Gadarene demoniac said, "This is what Jesus did for me." Mm-hmm. You knew me when I was all messed up in the caves. You know me now. Let me teach you what happened. What I experienced inside of my head when the Son of God spoke to me and I had those voices speaking against him. And then I heard his voice interspersed back and forth, bits and pieces of what he was saying. And then all of a sudden, bam, I stepped out of darkness and into his marvelous light. What kind of blessing is available in your mouth today? What people do you need to avoid? What people do you need to speak to? So, and bless you each to find your place of blessing and where you need to move and what you need to speak and come into agreement with so that you can have the thing that God has called you to possess. The books that I write. So, just some thoughts. Love you guys.